Welcome, everybody, to the ROI Online Podcast. And today I'm lucky, or I count it as lucky, because Colin Gray is on the ROI Online Podcast. Colin, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so Colin, you're from Scotland, and I think that was the main reason I invited you. I just wanted a contrasting accent to have a No,
just a bit of variety.
Just a little bit of variety. My Texas accent, as it gets a little bit dull. But Colin, you have this really cool platform called Alitu, and it's a podcast hosting platform. You also have a website called thepodcasthost.com. You've got a great YouTube channel. You've got a podcast called Podcraft. And you've been doing podcasting for a while. I found was really interesting. You taught podcasting in university. I didn't even know they did that.
Yeah, it was actually for the lecturers. So it wasn't an official university course as such. It was teaching lecturers how to use podcasting as a teaching tool. So I taught all sorts of technology for teaching purposes, and podcasting was just the one that's really sort of caught on for me, actually. And that was the basis of Podcraft as well. It's funny that actually the fact that Podcraft, our podcast on podcasting, is now seasons based. It's kind of we do a season which is a course essentially. That's because of back at the university days when I created one course, 10 episodes, which was how to launch your first episode. So it's funny how it all kind of, you start one thing and it definitely doesn't end up the way you expect always. It branches off into all sorts of different things.
So why in the world do you kind of get excited about podcasting? Now, this is back in 2007 or earlier. Is that correct?
That was 2007, 2008. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So why are you such a cutting edge adopter of this radical technology, right?
Yeah. Well, do you know what? There's a really specific reason back then, and it's bled into so much of what we do now as well. Like back then, my job was to teach lecturers, like I said, so teach the teachers how to teach, which is very meta, but that was my job. And lecturers at universities, teachers, professors, maybe that's more what you call them in the US, professors in universities, they're busy. Like they have a lot of stuff to do. They've got everything from teaching to research to like student mentoring, all that kind of stuff. So it was always so hard to get them to come to our workshops to learn how to teach more effectively. They all know their stuff. They're so good at what they do, but very few of them had actually been taught how to teach. So that was the trouble. Like they know their subject, but they don't necessarily know how to actually teach that to their students. It was a really funny kind of dichotomy I always found in universities that. So that was my job, to help them to teach. And I was more on the technology side, using technology to teach. And there were many other people like me who taught more the techniques and the strategies and the kind of the theory of how to teach. So the technology side was mine. And because they were so busy, we ran these workshops. You'd have very few turning up. And in the end, podcasting really caught on for me because I ran a couple of courses. I designed them online. I made them so that it was just a little online course where you logged on to this little space that the lecturers had access to anyway. You did a 10-minute lesson each day, and it had an audio component. So that was me recording a 5 or a 10-minute class. They could listen to it anywhere, anytime, download it to their phone, their device, whatever that might be. And we got so much more engagement with that than we did with any of the in-person stuff. They didn't have to turn up to a 2-hour workshop. All they had was, 10 minutes where they download it to their phone or their MP3 player back in those days, and go for a walk and they listen to it. Or often we found that they would listen to it on the bus or, in the car driving to work or something like that. Really, that was what kind of spurred me in the early days. The fact that you could create this content that was so much easier for people to consume. So easy that these really busy people, suddenly they were actually taking part in the things that we were creating. So, and that's kind of gone right into everything we do these days as well. Like the podcasting, really, it's that space, isn't it, where it's taking up that wasted time. You're ironing your clothes, you're walking the dog, you're hoovering the house, something like that. But you get to listen to something, you get to learn, be motivated, or just be entertained. So that's a big part of why I love it.
Yeah. So I was relating because, we serve entrepreneurs, business owners, and that's part of one of my things. They are busy doing
Yeah.
their thing, but I need to help them adopt some technology to grow the value of their business and help them accomplish their overall goal
Yes.
of
Yeah.
starting the business. And
Hmm.
yet, yeah, podcasting is like this thing that's really becoming more and more popular. People are accepting it more. What? Tell us a little bit about the statistics, the reasoning behind it. What's going
Yeah, sure.
on in the industry?
Yeah, it's growing fast at the moment. Well, no, sorry. I see. Even I fall into this trap. Podcasting has never grown fast. This is the trouble with podcasting. It's not a bad thing though, because it's been a slow, steady growth. That's what podcasting has always been. It's never had that huge inflection point that YouTube had, or blogging had back in the early 2000s. It never had that hockey stick curve. But what it has had is, over the last 15 years, since 2004, 2005, is slow, steady growth every single year. And this year, the last 2 years, I remember looking at the stats. There's a survey comes out called the Infinite Dial, which shows podcasting stats. And listenership has grown faster the last couple of years, though, than anything before that. So we're up to now. Let me try and remember the stats off the top of my head. We're up to approximately a third of US citizens, because it's mostly US surveys here, of US citizens listening to podcasts on a regular basis. So that's 1 in 3 people now listen on a monthly basis. And as far as I remember, it was around 20%. So around 1 in 5 listen on a weekly basis. So, I mean, that's quite good numbers, really. That surprised me when I saw it, because I would have thought, if you go out and talk to the average person, it's not going to be 1 in 5 that listens every single week to a podcast. That's really good stats there. And that's up from sort of 1 in 10 or 1 in 15, 5 years ago or so. So it is growing, it's doing well.
I was shocked that I think it's just assumed. Yeah, you need a YouTube channel, and you should be putting videos on YouTube, and that's even difficult for most brands to even consider.
Yeah.
But the number of YouTube channels compared to the number of podcast channels
Yeah.
is exponentially more on YouTube.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for a great way to start producing content and have a competitive edge in a relatively uncrowded forest or platform, it's podcasting. Wrong?
Absolutely. Yes. No, absolutely. Yeah. It was the hype around YouTube, wasn't it? Remember, I mean, I couldn't tell you the year, but say 2012, 13, something like that. YouTube it just took off. It was suddenly mainstream. There was a huge curve there, wasn't there? It just went from zero to everyone knew about it in no time whatsoever. And I think when any medium does that, and it's happened to so many social medias over the years as well, hasn't it? Like Twitter, like Instagram, suddenly everyone has heard of it all at once. And that's when marketing companies and sales companies start throwing their weight behind it, and that's when all the businesses go, "Oh, we're missing out here! Quick, get on board!" And they do it, but maybe they pay somebody else to do it, or they do it badly. And it's funny because I think that's a strength of podcasting, and it's never had that. So people that do podcasting, they're like, "Oh, I quite like this medium. I'm gonna try and do this well." And so we've never had that influx of rubbish, of nonsense. I mean, we get rubbish podcasts, obviously, but we've never had that same kind of just millions of just terrible things coming on. So I think that's a strength of the medium.
One thing that was kind of funny to me, and I didn't think about this, but everyone knows what the #1 search engine is. It's Google. And everybody quotes what the second biggest search engine is, YouTube. But do you know what the third largest search engine is?
I do not know.
It's Apple iTunes, Apple
Oh,
Podcast.
really? Oh, that's good to know.
And that was like, wow. And you see Spotify, they picked up Joe Rogan, and you see these other platforms that were designed for maybe something else. All of a sudden, they're starting to position to really onboard a podcasting audience and deliver podcasting content.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I say that YouTube podcasting has never had that influx from marketing companies, sales companies, but I have seen a big growth in that in the last year or so.
Mm-hmm.
There has been, and it's stories like you're talking about there, like Spotify spending 500 million on podcasting companies on investments. It's other companies coming into it. It's a lot of money coming into podcasting, and suddenly there's awareness. So yeah, I mean, it's good and bad, isn't it? Like a lot of the old school podcasters moan about it. They claim it's taken away the freedom of the medium. It's corporatizing it. It's all that kind of stuff. But I think in a way, some of that's true. But the more money that comes into podcasting, that means the more investment in the infrastructure and the tools and if there's more advertising dollars, that's going to filter down to the smaller podcasters as well. There'll always be more of it goes to the top shows, but the indie podcasters are still going to see a bit of that, I believe. So it has to be at least partly a good thing for us.
So let's say you're a brand and someone's been encouraging, someone like me has been encouraging you need to adopt podcasting as a content production commitment or activity. It used to be blogs that it was hands down, you need to be publishing blogs, but more and more people are backing off on that. And I see the podcasting as a way to diversify your content production and deliver it across multiple mediums. But what would you say? What's the attitude or strategy that you would coach a business person to consider before they decide to step in and do this?
And do podcasting. I mean, I think I would, and this is ironic considering what we do, but I usually encourage people to think blogging first, because I believe that podcasting does work really well, but it works better alongside text as well. And that's partly because, like you say, that's cool to know that iTunes is up there in terms of search engines, but it is still a fraction of the volume of searches that goes through Google itself, that goes through text search. So you can grow an audience through iTunes by all means, but it's there's limits to what you can do, I would say, with that alone. Whereas if you're a business, particularly, certainly if you're a hobbyist, if you're just creating a fun show, you're just looking to grow an YouTube audience, an iTunes audience, then great, just put out the podcast. But if you're a business, you're looking to solve people's problems. It's about being found when people need you, when they're looking for a solution to the problem that you solve. And a huge part of that is first typing into Google. So for me, one of the normal funnels around how a business can grow a good podcast is that they start capturing those questions. You're blogging on that, but you're blogging and you're then repurposing that into the other content as well, as in a podcast, perhaps even a video. It's something that I've talked about a lot in the past is a content stacking approach, which is when you think about the content you're solving, the problems you're solving, and you create, let's say, a season of content. Let's take your first 5 to 10 biggest problems that you solve. Every business, they always have 1 or 2 questions which customers ask them most often. Right. So think up those, sit down for just 20 minutes and write down those top 5 to 10 questions that you get asked. And often there'll be a group in there, maybe 4 or 5 of those questions that are a theme. You can group them together, and maybe you can create a season of 6 to 8 episodes for that first season, so you can invest in those first 5, 6, 7, 8 episodes. What I normally do then is I'll create a blog post on each topic. I'll go and then record a podcast episode, but with video as well. Often you don't need to do this, but it's a little bonus if you can. You'll record that podcast episode based on that blog post. And it's often really easy to record a podcast episode. If you've just written a blog post and then you speak about it, often it's much more tight, it's much more easy to do, much less mistakes, because you've just thought it all through. It's all in your head. So it just kind of spills out onto the page. And if you can do it in video as well, then you can take the audio track off to publish as a podcast. You can take the video track, you can take highlights from it, put shorter clips on YouTube, or even the whole thing if you really want to. And then you end up with these 3 bits of media. You've got a blog post, a podcast, and a video. all three created in much less time than it takes to create any one of those individually. And that's really powerful. And the thing that happens after you've created that first season, say you have 6 episodes there covering one theme, like so for us, for example, if it's podcasting, maybe it's like how to start your podcast. Maybe it is that 6 episodes that just show you how to get that first episode out there. That's all it is. Then even if you decide at the end of those 6 episodes, podcasting is not actually for us, it's not really our medium, it's not something we enjoy doing, which is fine. Then you've still got this really valuable chunk of data. You've got this really, really valuable chunk of content here that can go on the website. It answers questions. You can point people towards it. They can download just those 6 episodes, get a really good bit of learning. And that's really valuable for you. But the key thing there is because you've got all 3, you can be found in all 3 of those search engines.
Exactly.
The massive net of Google, people are typing in, how do I start a podcast? They'll find your blog posts on it. But then they'll also see the podcast player in those blog posts, and they might listen to the podcast there. For me, that's one of the biggest missed opportunities a lot of podcasters aren't taking advantage of. It's text search. It's writing good show notes, good blog posts that go alongside the podcast episodes. So people find them in Google search, they see the player, they listen to the show, and they subscribe that way. So that's often how I would recommend businesses go about it, certainly. If you're thinking about it really for a return on investment, long-term growth, that's one of the best ways to go about it.
Yeah. So we started our podcast about a little over 3 months ago. And the thing that excited me is here I am, I'm an agency and I'm trying to encourage my clients to get into blogging. And yet I struggle with coming up with topics on the blogs, and I have a whole team that would produce them. Okay. But yet I can set up a time, have a great conversation just like this, and get these beautiful insights in a conversation and an interview, and then take that and we'll have a video version of it on YouTube for discoverability. We'll also put this into Vidyard. That's our video hosting tool that keeps everything and the data and stuff on our website. But then we'll pull off the audio layer, just like you said. We'll push that out into the podcast episodes, take the show notes, write a blog, and then in that blog post, it has a video option. It has the text of the conversation. It has the audiogram, or the, what do you call it? The little nice player that's in it.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
And even the transcript from the conversation as well. And imagine over time how authoritative this domain will become because of all of these conversations being associated with it around this part of how to empower business owners to get modern in this age of modern marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And sometimes I see businesses, particularly hobbyists sometimes too, but businesses particularly, like they're covering topics. They're doing a podcast episode. It's great content. You listen to it, and then you go to the website to maybe review. I often do this. I'll listen to it for 30 minutes in the car, and I'm like, oh, this is really good. I wish I could take notes right now, but I'll go and have a look at the show notes later. And I go back to the website to review it, to go back through thinking, right, I hope they've got a good summary here. I want to really think about what they talked about here. And I'm just there dying for the information. And I get to the show notes page, and all it is a sentence saying, hey, in this episode, I talked to blah, blah, blah from blah, blah, blah. Have fun. Yeah. And that's it. And it's such a missed opportunity. Because I'm there and I'm frustrated. I'm like, come on, I want the info again. I'm not going to listen to the whole half hour again. I just want the summary to remind me what you talked about. I would like put my email in here to get some stuff. If the information was here, I would be so well disposed towards this company right now that I'd probably look around the website. I would see what other stuff you do, what other content you have. But instead, I'm just going to hit the close button in frustration and leave. And it's such that's from the customer point of view, but even the search opportunity too is just, there's none. You're not going to be found in search when you have show notes like that too. So it frustrates me.
A lot of people are brainwashed on SEO, search engine optimization. And so they're trying to please the robots, and they cram all this text onto the pages to game the system, when if actually they just forgot that and decided to have great conversations like this and put the text and the show notes in there, then it's handled.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
super. It's just you produce content for humans and you'll end up with a much better product.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Google wants. They want good content for humans because that makes people come back to Google again and again if they can surface great content for humans. So, and Google is one of the smartest countries. They almost are a country in terms of employees. One of the smartest companies in the world. So they know how to surface content that's good for humans. They know how to avoid the SEO tricks and all that. So yeah, just create good answers, solve people's problems, and that'll sort yourself out.
It's one of the hurdles that people have to get past in producing content is technology. And I was one of those as well. It's like, all right, so I'm going to record these conversations. Do I record it in GarageBand? What do I record it in? How am I going to edit it? I'm not an editor. I was just like, that was a big barrier for a while. Was conceiving how I was going to do it. And so you have this tool that offered me a easy solution to do a professional job to get past that hurdle. Where did that idea come from, and why do you think that you could all of a sudden turn into a SaaS company when you've been teaching people how to do podcasts?
That's a good question. And it was difficult. The answer to your first question is I decided to try and create it because so many people had that exact same problem. Through our teaching, through our website, like the website really started to gain a lot of traction. The website being the podcasthost.com. That's the site I started back in 2010, 11 when I was teaching still at the uni. It started to gain a lot of traction, and therefore we got more and more and more questions through the site. And the top question was always, how do I make editing easier? Like, I just don't want to learn this tool. I don't want to learn Audacity or Audition, or, it's not that hard, but still I don't want to do it. It's not my skill, this technology stuff. And there's so much in here. Like, what's equalization? What's compression? What's a bit rate? I don't know any of these terms. So it was just really obvious that this was it was one of the biggest barriers in podcasting. It's the thing we are asked the most. And I've always been quite technology literate. I kind of played around a lot with development when I was younger. I'm not a proper developer by any means, but I know enough to know when something might be possible and to play around with it. So I just started working with a developer. We'd start to make a bit of money at that point on the website through affiliate marketing. So I was paying my own salary, but we had a wee bit left over, not a lot, but a wee bit to pay towards the developer to play around with it. And
a wee bit, sorry to interrupt, but to my American audience, a wee bit is a little bit.
a little bit.
We're talking with Colin Gray, and he's from Scotland. This is, he's talking about Alitu, this beautiful tool. Back to you, Colin.
Sure. So we had enough to experiment, and it turned out that with some existing tools at the time, we could do quite a lot of the editing. Like, we could mix in the music, we could chop together a bunch of different clips. So if the user uploaded 5 different clips, we could piece them all together, put the music on the start and the end. We could clean it up a bit, do a bit of noise reduction, level it so the volumes are all level and correct, and then export it and send it off to Libsyn or Blueberry or Buzzsprout or your publishing platforms. So within 6 months, it became obvious that this was actually going to be quite possible. So I started looking for funding at that point and managed to get some from the Scottish government. Actually, the Scottish government are really good in terms of trying to encourage entrepreneurialism, whatever that word is, trying to start a business. And I guess when you talk about starting it, why did I think we could start a SaaS company? I don't think I even thought about it that deeply. I just knew that we had this audience out there that I know and love and talk to every day. And they had this problem. And I thought, if I can solve this problem for them, at least in a small way, I don't think I'm going to have to worry about trying to sell it. I think this will sell itself. And in a lot of ways, that was true, actually. There was a lot of speed bumps over the last couple of years to get to where we are now. And there's still speed bumps along the way. But people respond really well to it. It seems to go down well. It solves that problem. We're putting new features in every day to solve even more problems. So it's been fun, certainly.
So as your audience, you probably get data of your account users. I'm curious at, what's your growth rate? What markets are really adopting Alitu? And then of course I have other questions, but let's go there.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think it's funny. People ask me this a lot, and I've tried to research it because I'm quite a data geek. Like, I like to know these things. I like to know the trends. I'm always in the analytics. But the user base really kind of defies categorization in a lot of ways. Like, we have such a mix of people using it. We have everything from hobbyists to big companies using it. I think if I was forced to say what's maybe the biggest category, it's solo entrepreneurs. It's people like coaches, consultants, people that work on their own, that really trade on their personal brand. So it's really about their name, their expertise, their authority. And it's always been, that's what podcasting works almost the best for. It's the biggest return on investment for people like that, because it really grows your own authority. So you can then sell, high price consulting and stuff like that. So people like that are happy to spend, because that's the thing. So Alitu costs a bit of money. It costs $28 a month. It's not super expensive, but it's enough that, hobbyists that are on a really low budget, that it's not easy for them to afford. So, but people who are running a business around it, it's a no-brainer, because it saves them a couple of hours every week, potentially. So $28 is nothing compared to that. So that's probably the most common person for us. It's those kind of solo entrepreneurs, those individuals. They can't quite afford to get a full editor yet, which companies can, but they can afford to pay for some less to make it easier.
Absolutely. I even think that, we use it in our system. There's a lot to developing and publishing a podcast. You have to have a publishing platform like Buzzsprout. You have to have an editing software. You need to be able to push it on your blogs. You need the creative aspect. There's a lot going on. You have to get set up in all of the directories. Mm-hmm. But I found that what I really liked was how Alitu integrated with Buzzsprout so easily and was very complimentary. Did you spend time with them to make it easy to adopt? That's interesting.
Yeah. So we've worked with Buzzsprout a fair bit. I know the guys over at Buzzsprout quite well. So they've worked with us. We've got the development teams talk to each other quite a bit, and we work with all the other hosting platforms as well. So yeah, they're all quite willing, because we're happy to promote them a little bit as well, and they help promote us a wee bit. And we all kind of want to make it easier for the whole process to be done as well. Like, the guys at Buzzsprout are totally focused around very similar to what we do, which is simplicity, ease of use, just making it as simple as possible for you to get your show out there. So yeah, they're good folks to work with.
That's excellent. So I still have some more questions. We didn't really talk about how long we would want to talk, but do you still have more time?
Yeah, I've got a bit more time. Yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
All right, love it. So figuring out a way to get paid for doing podcasting is like this other side. Monetization was a word I was struggling to come up with, but
yeah, sure.
So let's talk about monetization. And, when should you consider monetizing? How much, of your process should you use? 6 months, a year? Talk to us about what are proper expectations of monetization, and then how to approach it.
Yeah, sure. One of the biggest questions out there, isn't it? There's a group of podcasters out there that never want to monetize. They're just doing it for the love of it. They're just putting their voice out there, and that is absolutely fine. And they're great people, great podcasters. So putting them aside, there's another group who decide from the very start, I'm starting a podcast, I'm not going to make a living out of this, but I want to at least make a little bit out of it. Maybe I'll, cover some bills. Maybe I'll get sent some gear to review, and therefore get like free things all the time. And, those people, I believe they should start thinking about it from the very start. I'll explain the sort of stages though, because there's a lot of different stages along the way. Do you do much in the way of affiliate marketing at all, Steve? Like, do you use that?
Yeah, so I'm starting
Yeah.
to create those affiliate relationships. I have a book on
Hmm.
Amazon, and then when we talk about a book or something, then I'll go into the affiliate market and get a
Yeah.
link. So if
Yeah.
someone buys a book, then we would get a little
You
20
get a
cents
commission.
or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So that is the ideal starting point for podcasters for me. Like one of the most common ways that a podcaster might earn money is sponsorship. So a product gets in touch with the podcast. They say to the host, will you talk about our product? We'll give you this amount of money per 1,000 listeners. That's how it tends to work. So for sponsorship, you tend to need at least a few thousand listeners every single episode. Usually the interest starts around, 2, 3,000, if not up to 5,000 or so. And by that point, your usual rates are for one product to sponsor a show. They'll pay you maybe $20-ish per 1,000 for the pre-roll, about 25-ish for the mid-roll. So it works out, once you put it all in, maybe $40 per 1,000 listeners per episode. So let's say you've got 2,000 listeners, that's $80 per episode. So
Hmm.
it's not a great deal of money at that point, but I mean, that's not nothing to most people. It covers your bills, certainly, and it starts to pay for a few meals and a few beers, that kind of thing. So it's quite nice. But like I said, you have to be up at the few thousand listeners by that point. So that's, I mean, most people, unless you're doing really well, unless you have a pre-existing audience, it'll take you a good 6 months to a year to get to that point in most niches, if not longer, absolutely. There's many people in many niches that are, 1,000, 2,000 after a year is a good audience. But what I usually tell people to do is, if they're thinking that might be their aim long term, is think about affiliate marketing from the first days though. So treat affiliate marketing as your sponsorship. So get on Amazon, let's say, Amazon Associates, one of the easiest programs out there for you. Find a few products, maybe some books, like you mentioned there, Steve, some books that suit your audience, and treat them as your sponsors. They're not coming to you to tell you to sponsor the show, but you can say, you can review a book each week on your topic, or you can say, this episode is sponsored by the blah, blah, blah book, which might be really useful to you. Go and buy it at this link. And therefore you get a commission. The reason for that is it means that you start to learn how to do sponsorship. So you learn how to put these slots in there. Your audience gets used to it as well. So they expect that each episode there's going to be a small sponsor, and nobody minds that because they know they're getting this for free. The thing that I've found some listeners do mind is if you do 50 episodes entirely for free, no sponsorship, no mention of any kind of sales, but then suddenly you bring in sponsorship at episode 50, listeners go crazy. They're like, oh, you've sold out. You've got, oh no, this is terrible. So that's another good reason to bring it in early. If you think you're going to go that way, bring it in early and practice it with affiliate marketing. So that's a really nice way to do it. So yeah, sponsorship affiliate is certainly one. There's a fair few others. If you want, do you want to go through a few others, Steve, or do you think that's enough
Please.
to start folk with? Yeah.
No, I'd enjoy that.
I mean, while sponsorship and affiliate marketing are probably the most common, I would argue they're certainly not the most effective or the most profitable. Usually the most profitable and the most easy to sell as well in many ways are your own products and your own services. We've talked, for example, about Alitu. So Alitu is our SaaS product we talked about, our software product we talked about a minute ago. It is our own product, and now we sell that on our own podcasts. So I mention Alitu a lot on Podcraft. I mention it a lot in our blog posts, on our videos, that kind of stuff. As soon as you have your own product, it's so much easier to sell because your audience are listening to you. They get to know you. They get to like and trust you. And therefore, if they hear that you have created something, especially if it's based really strongly around problems that they are having, it's a total no-brainer for them to buy and use this thing. Now, it doesn't need to be software by any means. Like, we start with courses. So I in the very early days, I created a few courses based around how to start a podcast, and I would sell them on our podcast or our blog. So you can start with even a little ebook, a 20-page ebook that costs $5. You can try and sell that on your podcast. Upgrade that to a course a few months later. Upgrade that to a suite of courses a few months later. Add some coaching on a bit later, like really high price coaching. Suddenly you can start charging, $1,000, $2,000 a month for executive coaching or something based around your topic. These things are all really possible with podcasting because of the authority and the trust that you build. So yeah, I mean, that's usually where people end up. I would say the most successful podcasters end up is selling their own stuff way down the line.
I'm glad you brought that up, because in my mind, that's already a consideration, but I'm not thinking about everyone else. But of course, I would encourage an entrepreneur to do that. That would be the main reason you would start this up. What's one of the best ways that you can grow an email list? Do you have some good suggestions in a podcast other than the obvious, hey, send me your email?
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, you've got to give them a benefit, don't you? You've got to give them something in exchange. They're giving you something, so you need to give them something. I've seen a few good examples. I mean, it goes from the kind of the simple up to the simple but effective, to the hard work but really, really effective. The simple version is just to create one thing that is of benefit to your audience, which you can give away. So it's those products that we mentioned earlier, but you're giving it away for free in exchange for an email, based on the premise that actually their email address is more worthwhile than $5 or $10 at this point. That you'd happily pay $10 to get somebody's email to be able to, keep them up to date, keep them loyal, and sell them something better later down the line. So like an ebook, so a 5-10 page ebook, a checklist, something simple. This is what we give away, is actually an 8-day guide to launching your first episode. I've mentioned that a few times now, because that is the biggest thing that a lot of our audience want. Is just the simplest, easiest way to get their first episode out into the world. So we've got a printed guide which we can send out, or download the ebook version of it, which people sign up for. And that's a big part of our funnel. That's how we get people on the email list.
Why 8 days? Why not 7 days? Why not 9 days? Why?
Well, it started out at 20, actually. So it was a 20-day guide, but it was just too long, actually. People never stuck to it. It was too long. And I narrowed it down to 8 because I felt like that was the minimum possible steps to do it in a quality way. Not 7, because actually the one that I would miss off. The 8 is essential to me, not 9, because that extra one I think you could get rid of. So 8 was just what I whittled it down to, as the essentials. So that's the simple but still effective way. Like, you're giving away one thing everywhere, and you just mention this everywhere. You're like, if you want to get our 8-day guide to starting your show, solving the biggest problem with podcasting, go to thepodcasthost.com/start. And that's it. You set up a short link that you can give out to everyone. Everyone knows where to go. You mention it every single episode a few times. It's not annoying. People want this because it helps them. It helps them solve a problem, so they don't mind at all. And people go to it eventually. They'll head over there at some point. So that's the simple way, but it works. The harder work way, someone that I've seen work really well, it's, what was her name? I never remember the name of the lady that showed me this in the first place. I'll maybe come back to me, but anyway, she does a podcast. This lady I know that does a podcast does a different lead magnet for every single episode.
Wow.
So, sorry, by lead magnet, what I mean is it's like a thing that you give away for leads. So they give you your email address.
Yeah.
And she does a checklist for every single episode. So every single episode, she covers a particular topic, and she creates one page, an A4 page, nicely designed, which has a checklist, 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 or whatever. Here's what you have to do to put what I talked about on this episode into action. And it's brilliant. It's a fair bit of work, obviously. Yeah. It's an extra maybe hour every single episode at least, if not more than that. But because it's so specific to that episode, because it's so valuable, because it really helps people put this stuff into action, she gets tons of leads. She gets so many people signing up for that. She's grown a huge audience around it. And yeah, just really, really effective. So if you can put in that extra work, that extra time, those specific ones work really well. And just very quickly, a kind of middle of the road is, and something we do, is category based. So, there's category based magnets. So what I mean by that is we have maybe 5 or 6 main categories we talk about. So one is editing and production. One is equipment. One is how to start. One might be podcast software. So maybe you only make 5 or 6 different downloads, 5 or 6 different guides. and you mentioned the one that's specific to the topic you're talking about. So maybe on one episode of our podcast, we're talking about microphones. So I say, oh, download our equipment guide. So it's not totally specific to that episode, but it is specific to that topic. It's definitely more relevant than just giving them the how to start every single time. So that can work really well. That can be less work, but still effective.
I was wanting to direct people to that page, and I'm looking for it in my 37 tabs that I have open in Chrome here. But you have this those 4 categories on a certain page on the podcasthost.com, right?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, yeah. What is that URL?
For which one? Sorry.
Where you have the 4 categories, where you can click and get a download for each of the categories.
Oh, do you know what? We've been testing a couple of different things. So they're actually not on the site right now. We've only got our main lead magnet on our website right now. But I could send you a link afterwards to show a few of these specific ones, certainly. So if you want to stick them in your show notes to give people some examples.
Yeah, I was going to promote you here, but yeah. So the podcasthost.com. So
yeah, sorry, Steve. Yeah, if you want to look at the general guide download, it would be thepodcasthostcom/start. And then in that guide, that's our how to start guide. At the bottom of that guide, you can see the type of opt-ins that we tend to offer. So yeah, absolutely. That'll give people a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's like the worst mistake you made in podcasting?
And I thought you were going to say in life there. That was
not in life. Right. I've got you beat there, but in podcasting, what's like the worst train wreck?
The worst train wreck in
just
podcasting.
So that we can all kind of relate or avoid.
Yeah. I have done so it doesn't matter how long I do this, I have done the standard mistakes again and again, which is, for example, only a few months ago, I did the classic, I've got it all set up. We've got a really good, important interview going on. We jump into it, everything's going well. And I look down at the recorder and there's nothing on. It's just not working. It's just not recording. I've just simply not pressed the record button. I mean, that's the classic one, but it happens again and again. Like I get excited about things still. And I'm skipping over my checklist and not doing it properly. I lost actually a bunch of files recently. That was the biggest train wreck probably recently. I was working with a client, and it was one of our long-term clients, one of our sort of biggest people we work with. And I was interviewing her, and it was like, the idea was to do about 2 hours worth of interviews and turn that into 5 or 10 short episodes. So it was one big chunky interview, one big content creation exercise that turned into a whole series worth of content. And it was going really well. It all went great. And it was just when I pressed stop on the recorder, I had pressed record on that one at least, but when I pressed stop, the whole recorder just crashed. And I've never seen a Zoom recorder do that before. Zoom recorders are usually totally bomb-proof, but this thing just crashed. I think it was a dodgy memory card in the end, actually. And I didn't quite lose it all, thankfully, but I lost about an hour. I lost about an hour of that whole thing. And I had to phone up this client who is really busy, paying us quite a lot of money, and say to her, like, I know this is meant to be my job. This is meant to be exactly what we do, and therefore it should never go wrong, but this completely messed up. Can we do this all again? That was terrible. That was awful. And it just reminded me, like, quite often I recommend people, have a backup, belt and braces, have 2 places you're recording on every single one. And I didn't do it that time around. Like, normally I would have had the recorder recording, but also have maybe Audacity recording on the computer in the background, just in case. So you've got 2 things, but I hadn't done it that time. And I would get anyone else in trouble for not doing that, but yet I missed it.
Colin, I usually keep these about 55, 60 minutes long. I could ask you about 30 more minutes worth of question, but so if I got 2 more questions.
Cool, go for it.
So if people want to connect with you, what kind of clients, real quick, what kind of clients do you work with, and how do they connect with you?
We work with clients who want to tell stories. we tend to not do a lot of production these days. Actually, we concentrate just on the software and the writing and the content, but we still love to work with people that want to tell good stories. One of my first employees, Matthew McLean, is an audio drama producer, so that's his thing. He creates really cool stories with great soundscapes and actors and stories and all this kind of stuff. And so we love to create that kind of thing, but that translates quite well to actually working with businesses, because to create a good business podcast, you know, if you just do standard interviews these days with a business, with a brand, often it just doesn't make much of an impact. It's just too salesy, or it's a bit too obvious what it is. But you can create great stories, you can tell stories, and you can add those audio drama elements to business stories to make them really pop, to make them really great. And if anyone wants an example of that, like listen to Business Wars. Have you ever listened to Business Wars, Steve?
No, but
really.
Business Wars?
Yeah, Business
Podcast?
Wars. Yep, it's a Business War, the Business Wars podcast. Search for it on iTunes or elsewhere, Apple Podcasts or elsewhere. It's so good. They just tell the story. So they've got one, for example, which is Pepsi versus Coke. So it's the story of that business, those two businesses going to war over 50 years. And it's all acted out, it's soundscaped, it's all that stuff. It's just so good. And you can create great shows like that for companies that want to put themselves out there. So we love clients like that just want to tell stories, that want to do it in an interesting way. So yeah, anything like that's interesting.
So Colin, when you do these interviews, I'm curious about what's the one question that nobody ever asks you, but you wish they would?
That's a good question. What do I wish they would ask? I'm not sure, Steve. Put me on the spot there. Do you know, I'm trying to think, because there was a question that I said that to somebody recently, only a month ago or so. I said, you know, nobody's ever asked me that before. What was it? I can't remember now, I'm afraid. But I do know that, I'm just going to say, I do know that people always just, I mean, there's definitely a top 5 questions in podcasting. There's always the stuff you haven't asked me, which is good actually, is about the gear. People always ask about the gear. They're like, what mic should you use? What recorder should you use? All that stuff. And it just doesn't matter that much. Like, as long as you get something reasonably good quality, pay more than $50 and you're almost certain to get something that will work perfectly well. So that stuff just doesn't matter, but people always spend the time on it. So actually, thinking about that, the thing that people most often don't ask me that I wish they would is how to create good content. It's how to think about putting together an episode that actually engages people, how to present well, how to speak well, you know, how to warm up your voice, for example, like silly little things like that. People don't think about how to warm up your voice so that you sound good on mic. And people often come to us and say, like, I hate my voice. I don't want to speak on a microphone. I sound weird when I hear myself, which is true. You always sound different than what you imagine. But things like warming up your voice, doing little vocal exercises, treating like acting as if you're an actor, a presenter. You know, people that go on the news, like news presenters, or people that go out there and act on telly or whatever, they spend hours and hours practicing their voice, exercising their vocal cords, like warming themselves up, like literally standing up and doing exercises before they speak, which people like us don't really think about, because you think you take speaking for granted. But things like that are so useful. And if people want a tip on them, actually, now I got a good friend of mine, Ian Anderson Gray, who teaches live presenting. He's a musician, he's a singer. But he teaches live video presenting as well. He put together 2 little vocal exercises for me, 2 videos, with a bunch of vocal exercises in them. So if anybody wanted to check them out, you can go over to, I'm pretty sure, I'll set up the short link, but it's thepodcasthost.com/vocal. And I'll set that up just after this, because I think that is probably the thing that people don't ask about that I think they should, is how to sound good on mic. Like how to make sure your voice comes across the best it possibly can. Yeah.
Excellent. Man, I've enjoyed this conversation. This has been fun. And
me too.
Learned a lot, and you're a great guest, and I appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So, Colin Gray, Colin, you spell Gray with an A, and that's Alitu. It's alitu.com, ALITU. right? .com.
That's right. Yes, absolutely.
And then the podcasthost.com. You're on LinkedIn.
Indeed.
It's got a YouTube channel. That was the thing that I really enjoyed. I was watching your YouTube, and you're so calm, and you're speaking in your Scottish accent, but you're very clear. We're just walking through this thing, and yeah, I appreciate you making that app. It really helps us, and it helped us adopt and get into this rhythm of creating these great podcasts. I think they're great. I enjoy the conversation. When can you sit and talk to someone one-on-one without being interrupted by your phone, by the kids running through, your spouse, the waiter, right? And talk about geeky stuff you enjoy. So thank you so much for spending some time. You all the way from, now although Colin's from Scotland, he's coming to us live from Australia.
Indeed. Well, no, thank you for saying that, Steve. That does mean a lot. It's always so good to hear when people actually find Alitu helpful, when it saves you time, when it saves you stress, or even the content or the videos or whatever. Like, we just kind of, I put stuff out there, my team puts stuff out there, and we hope it helps, but it's great to hear when it actually does. So thank you.
It's helped us. I appreciate it. Thanks for being a guest, and thanks for being on the ROI Online Podcast, Colin.
Thank you.